Chapter 4 of The Kingdom of Happiness by Jiddu Krishnamurti. The Temple of the Heart. We have been talking about the idea of truth and how to attain that truth and that happiness. I want to impress on you that truth, though abstract, is to me the embodiment of my particular teacher, the embodiment of my lover. If you went into a temple and saw the bare walls and the pillars and nothing but the mere outward shell, it would seem cold and lifeless. For even though there is a certain sense of aesthetic beauty and gorgeousness, in a temple you also need the image of your creation. Each one of us has a temple, but we must create the image, the idol, the beauty around which we can develop our love and devotion. For if we keep the temple empty, as most of us do, we cannot create. It is by adoration, by love, by devotion that we create, that we make the temple living. And that temple to me is the heart. If you place Him who is the embodiment of love and truth in your heart, if you create Him there with your own hands, your own mind, your own emotions, that heart, instead of being cold and abstract and far away, becomes real and living and radiant. Such is the truth. And we must realize that this temple, without the vitality, without the life, without the energizing influence that this image gives, becomes hard, becomes cold and joyless. Whereas if you have Him there, you become part of Him, you become Himself. You are the outer temple, and burning inside you is the eternal, this holy of holies into which you can go and worship at your ease, away from the world, away from all the turmoils and all the troubles. But you have to beautify the temple first. You have to make that temple, which is the physical body, perfect, strong, and really beautiful. Every gesture, every movement, every action, whether in time of welfare or in time of sorrow, at every hour, every moment of the day, must be refined and beautiful, and must represent the temple in which eternity abides. Therefore you must have this body absolutely clean, beautiful, radiant, so that He who is in your hearts can show Himself through your physical expressions. I do not think you sufficiently realize that with culture of mind and of emotion, there takes place refinement of the body. Without culture and refinement, the body becomes crude, ugly, and does not represent, in outward expression, Him whom you have within. The first thing you must bear in mind is that to possess Him in your hearts, you must have a suitable tabernacle, a suitable abode. And then, with that physical beauty, with that emotional and mental nobility, you will attain serious joyousness. Most of us, if we become serious, lose the sense of joyousness. Seriousness which is without joy, without delight, is artificial in most cases, and so must be avoided. If you cultivate seriousness with joy which springs up because you have Him in your heart as part of yourself, then that seriousness takes on a delight instead of turning to morbidity and clumsy expressions. When you see Him, you must see Him out of joy and not out of seriousness. You can only approach Him when you are really happy, when you are really enlightened, when you are really delighted, not through the seriousness of religiosity and a gloomy idea of spirituality. When you are really alive with joy, with happiness, He dwells in the temple of your heart. Yesterday I went out for a walk by myself. I wanted to regain my original joyousness, which for a moment I had lost. I struggled to get to a certain height emotionally and mentally, and I could not get there. I could not attain that altitude, that emotional and mental height, by merely struggling. I longed to reach my guru, my lover, my genius, my source of happiness. And as once before in India, I saw Him, not when I was struggling or trying to get near Him, but when I was natural and there was inside me a bubbling spring of happiness. I saw Him fill the sky, the blades of grass. I saw Him in the whole length of the tree. I saw Him in the pebble. I saw Him everywhere. I saw Him in myself. And so my temple was full, my holy of holies was complete. I was he, and he was myself, and that was the truth for me. The truth as an abstract thing is of no value until it gives you that intense personal joy and devotion and the desire to create, not only within yourself, but to create around you. As the birds sing of their own accord, at their own ease, of their own full-heartedness, so must truth come and fill your temple of its own accord. But you must supply the material. You must supply the circumstances. You must supply the marble out of which to carve the image. And that marble must be joy, intense happiness, serious joyousness. Be serious, not with long faces, not grotesquely, but serious with joyousness. Have that seriousness which gives you excitement. Excitement to play, excitement to be noble, excitement to be happy. And you must create such an image in your hearts. You must make your house his temple. Every day I have a different vision of my truth. When you are on the top of a mountain, there stretches before you a higher range, invisible from the plains. By climbing that range, you think you will at last reach the summit whence you will behold all things. But this is not so, for when you have climbed it, there is still another higher range hiding the complete vision. So it is with truth. There must be constant change, constant alteration of your vision. When you have that desire, that capacity to fill yourself with His genius, His strength, His nobility, then you yourself become noble and learn to reflect His divine originality. In Him are all the sources of originality, all the sources of beauty, all the sources of creation, and attempts to be original, beautiful, creative, are of little avail if we have not the understanding and the capacity to touch the source of things. While you have green fields and fair skies and quietness, you should place this graven image in your hearts, which you have created out of your own minds, with your own hands. I desire to force open the doors of the temple in each one of you and let in the sunshine which will help you to destroy that which is ugly, to create anew and to rebuild. For that is the only way by which you will attain that truth, the only way you will keep that eternity in your temple. And when He comes to each one of you, as He so often does come, He will abide with you only if you have the capacity to enshrine Him in the temple of your heart, if you have the wisdom to live with Him and not lose the fruit of many sorrows and ecstasies. How joyous and happy you will be if you have the desire to worship at that shrine, at that altar, and forget everything else. Yesterday, for a moment, I thought I had lost Him, and I could not breathe. I could not move. All the doors and windows of my temple were shut, and I was in darkness. I had to struggle to open them and search for Him. When I found Him and felt the reality of His presence, then all was once again peace and light and joy. After cloud and rain and storm, there comes a ray of sunshine. All nature bursts forth to meet that ray. So did I feel yesterday. Once you realize this beauty, this nobility, this eternal happiness which comes when you have felt this truth in your heart, the whole world becomes for you the holy of holies. You live and breathe and look from there, and every little thing, every little action, every little thought falls into its proper place, and you get the true refinement, the true restraint, the true enlightenment. That is the only way you will acquire the spark of genius. That is the only way you will be happy. If you have this serious joyousness, the sense of well-being, spiritual, moral, and intellectual, then you will see the glory. And every one of you will have that light, that purity, that sense of nobility and greatness which nothing in the world can disturb. Everything breathes His glory, and all that which is ignoble withers away and dies. You can have no conception of your loss if you do not go to the source of things. Only at the source will you know the beginning and the end. And what is much more important, you will be there with Him, you will be part of Him, and thus you yourself will become the source for thousands of others. So I want to keep before you this idea of a temple and of the image within. Wherever you are, whether you are in a room or in a street, whether you are playing or at work, you will be unruffled and have that solemn poise, for He is always with you. What does it matter to the God within if there is strife or struggle outside the temple? As long as you are tranquil, as long as you are worshiping and encouraging others to worship, as long as you are making others happy, what does anything else matter? All forms of outward worship, all interpreters of God, cease to affect you. As long as you have that glory, you will be happy. When you have drunk at that source, you will be a genius. You will create. You will make others happy. And for that, we exist. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The River and the Ocean. On a day when there is mile upon mile of blue sky, and there are innumerable shadows, the only thing to talk about is the kingdom of happiness, and of how, while we have the physical attractions and the physical beauty all around us, we may also have the spiritual happiness, that kingdom of happiness, within us. The only possible way to possess that kingdom is to forget yourselves and to identify your souls with the eternal. We all have this intense belief, to some it is more than belief, that a time must come, as I think it will come, when that voice to which we have been listening, that voice whose command we have obeyed, will urge us to give up all and follow Him. That is going to happen to each one of us. That order, that command will come to each one in varied forms, under different aspects, under different conditions, but it is bound to come. And when it comes, in what attitude of mind, in what emotional condition shall we respond? How shall we give up and follow? What will it mean to us? I have thought out for myself what it will involve. To me it seems that to give up the physical, the ordinary physical comforts, physical well-being, wealth, family relations, will be comparatively easy. What will be much more difficult and much more serious and much more worth giving up, much more sacred and holy, will be to give up my separate self and identify myself with Him. Identifying yourself with Him means that you must set aside your own predilections, your own prejudices, your own particular inclinations, and all such things. It is much more difficult, and yet that is what you will have to do. You will have to forget what you are and become like Him. Have you ever noticed how a small hill will hide a whole range of snowy mountains, so that you think that the little hill is the whole view, and forget the tremendous vista stretching far away, mile upon mile behind it? It is exactly the same with us. We think that by giving up little things we have succeeded. Little things do not matter. We need not give up little things. It is like standing in front of the little hill. We must go beyond that little hill to see the giant peaks. It is no good clinging to your own particular line, your own particular attitude, your own particular form of devotion or worship. The stars sparkle, brilliant and beautiful, before the moon comes out, and then they all give way and go into the background before the one queen, the one ruler of the sky. So must you all before Him who is our ruler. It does not mean that you must throw away your individuality, but that you must become like Him, and you can only do that if you are able to look at everything in life from His point of view. To an artist who looks at a cloud or the skies or a tree, these have a different meaning. He looks at them from the point of view of how he will paint them, of how he can reproduce them as a symbol to the world, not necessarily by copying them, but by sharing with others what he has perceived in them. That is exactly what you have to do. You have to destroy all the things that bind you and climb to that altitude where you become a part of Him. And from there you should look at yourself and at the world. It is no good always surrounding yourself with particular delights of your own. You must go up to that height and from there direct your minds and emotions and physical bodies, and that is the only way in which you will be able to follow him. How many of you, I wonder, will really understand, really follow, when the moment actually comes, the moment when you hear that voice which you recognize as the absolute authority, whose command is final? I wonder how many of you, even though you may obey, will mingle yourselves with him as a drop of water that disappears in the sea, a river that flows into the vast ocean. You are all much too narrowly individualistic. You have your own particular God, your own particular delight, your own particular way of speech, way of thought, way of expression. To follow does not mean that you should blindly accept, but to follow means that you must keep your eyes open and your hearts clear, free from all prejudices, all preconceived ideas, and so be able to lose yourselves in the eternal. That is the only way in which you should follow, the only way in which you can possibly create. If you live in that eternity, at that stupendous height, you become a genius. You become that which each one of you really longs to be, and then you will be happy. It is in forgetting the separate self, in destroying that self, in mingling with the universe that you can find happiness. And when you make distinctions by talking about particular groups, particular temperaments, particular types, you are wandering away from reality, not realizing that these are but marks of distinction, mere indications of your special environment. They do not solve the problem. The only solution is in the forgetting of the separate self, in becoming part of the eternal. Follow the eternal, which is perpetual, immutable, not the fleeting and the momentary. You will obtain a true perspective of your purpose if you realize that you must give suitable opportunities on the physical for the education of the soul. We always talk about educating the physical, but forget the education of the superphysical. The ego desires to evolve and attain perfection, and here on the physical, if you have in view the longing of the soul, you, the lower mind, will realize when and how you must yield to the cravings of the greater self. You ought to develop that habit of living in the kingdom of happiness, because I do not think you sufficiently realize how expansive it is, how this kingdom stretches mile after mile if you once enter its borders. I do not think you understand that happiness, real happiness, is above all things in the world, physical or spiritual. It is the only state worth entering, the only kingdom worth conquering and possessing. And I would take you all into that kingdom and let you see the beauty of it for yourselves, because once you have seen it, you will not abandon it. You will no longer desire the transient, changeable things. I am sure that more and more as time goes on, it'll be borne in on you that this is the only truth worth having, the only truth worth giving. You must also have culture, culture which comes from reading, culture of the ordinary attainments in the physical, the culture of consideration, of happiness, of that intense, serious joyousness. If you can have the culture from all these things, imbibe it, make it part of your nature, you will then become his real followers. Without culture, without refinement, you cannot become part of the more refined and the more cultured, which is he. Nor can you stand with him and cooperate intelligently and enthusiastically with him. A man who is an artist, who is creating, who is suffering, who stumbles, will be nearer to him than the one who is merely satisfied and worships at his own particular altar. You must be such an artist and cooperate with him and give to the world what each one of you really understands. And when you are in that state, you have no idea how the sense of loneliness, the sense of depression, all those things which hinder us, which kill our spirit, which weaken our sense of well-being, disappear. And when you are part of that one kingdom that matters in life, when you are with that life that lasts through the ages and eons, you forget whether you are lonely, whether you are depressed, whether you are great or successful. What most of you fear is loneliness, lack of love and personal friendship for each other. Those things, though they are pleasant for the moment, though they have their value, you do not miss because you have companionship with the eternal. Every tree, every bird, every blade of grass, every shadow gives you something which is worth more than the passing physical satisfactions, for it is part of the eternal. That is why you must have your life centered there, and thus gain your outlook from the eternal. End of chapter 5.